Georgia and LSU ready to get it riled up in Atlanta for the SEC championship. Georgia undefeated. They're likely in, even if they end up losing this game, into the college football playoff. That is, now LSU just took an L to Texas A&M. But if they can win this game, knock off the big dog, that'd be huge for Brian Kelly in year one. Would do a lot for the forward momentum and do a lot for expectations and resources, as if they need any more of those in Baton Rouge. This will be a big game. Needless to say, a big game for both programs. But what are the games within the game that you need to make sure you keep an eye on? I got 3 of them for you, and I think these 3 matchups will determine the outcome of the game. Let's not waste any more time, shall we? Harold Perkins versus, wait for it, Georgia's offensive coordinator, Todd Monkin. Now, it's sort of a funny battle to say out loud, right? You got one player and one coach. But the reason why I think this will impact the game so much, when we broke this game down, what's one of the biggest things that LSU needs to win this game? It's turnovers. And Harold Perkins, on a couple of occasions, the Alabama game and the Arkansas game, young freshmen just took it over. Just said, you know what? I'm going to step up today. I'm going to win this game for my team. Especially that Arkansas game. Had a couple of forced fumbles, a couple of sacks. Like, he is everywhere. And he's now elevated himself to the level where if you don't scheme for Harold Perkins, he will wreck the game. Now, Todd Monkin, being the OC for Georgia, great offensive coordinators, great play callers. They're able to run the offense in such a fashion that accounts for those game wreckers on the other side of the ball. So the battle that I'm watching is this chess game between where Harold Perkins lines up, whether he's at linebacker, whether he's off the edge, whatever they choose to do with him, versus how does Georgia, whether it's running a play away from him, whether they're accounting for him by just reading him in the RPO game or calling a power to try and overtake him with their size, like scheming it up for Harold Perkins will be crucial to the success for Georgia. Because like I already mentioned, the reality that LSU would like to live in is number 40 has himself one of those days, gets a pick, forces a fumble or two, and then you start to get some more juice if you're LSU. A little bit more belief. You steal some possessions from Georgia, and things could get interesting. So that battle from Todd Monkin versus Harold Perkins, I think is one to keep an eye on when you're watching the SEC title this coming Saturday. Really quickly, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, we would love to have y'all at the party. A ton of LSU faithful, a ton of Georgia faithful have already joined us here and subscribed. Thank you for coming and joining the party. If you haven't yet, though, jump on in. The water's fine. Also, follow me on the social channels at Judy Piquel on Twitter and on Instagram. The second battle that I'm watching in this game, Javon Bullard, the star position for Georgia on defense, versus Kayshon Boutte, the most electric, ability standpoint at least, wide receiver / playmaker for LSU in this game. Now, Kayshon Boutte came into the year with just, mountainous expectations. So far, he's got 42 catches, 431 yards, and a touchdown. So to this point in the year, you would say maybe it's been a little bit underwhelming. Tell you what, Kayshon Boutte, he just wants to win. He's going to be a high draft pick either way. He just wants to win. But in this kind of game, I think you need your top playmaker, your most talented player on your team to dictate the tempo and have a big impact on this game. Now, the reason why I think him and Javon Bullard is the matchup to watch, Javon Bullard is one of the best slot defenders in the country. He just lines it up and shuts it down. So far on the year, he has the most coverage snaps without a 15-plus yard reception. Translation, if he's lined up over you in the slot, don't even look that way. He's locking it up. He also does a great job in run support, really aggressive defender in terms of getting after the quarterback and sticking his nose in there. But I think what he does in the pass game this coming weekend will have a big impact on the eventual result. Because like I already said, LSU is going to have to find explosive plays somewhere. And the run game will be a big deal. Josh Williams, Jaden Daniels, we know that. That's kind of how they get down offensively with Mike Denbrock and company. But being able to have a 20-yard pass play, have something over the top that pops when those safeties creep up or when it's short yardage and you get to take a shot, that's the kind of play where you look to your best playmaker, where you look to the number 7 on your team. You got number 7 on your chest for a reason, Kayshon Boutte. If you can win that matchup in the slot against Javon Bullard, that will be crucial. That could be the game breaker for this whole thing. And like I said, this is the kind of game where you need your best player to step up. he's had a good year. Has he had a breakout year like he had a season or two ago? Not really. But this is the game that could change the entire complexion of how his season is remembered in Baton Rouge. So that back and forth between those two guys, two phenomenal players, two guys that will make a lot of money on Sunday in the not-too-distant future. Watch that matchup between Boutte and Bullard. I think it'll be a really good one, and I think it'll ultimately determine the pace that LSU can play with offensively. Because if you're able to get a couple of explosive plays, you're able to get the ball out to Boutte in space and let him work, that changes the entire complexion of how you call the game. Then on 2nd and 1, instead of running the football, maybe you are taking that shot on the slot fade. Instead of running the football and 2nd and goal from the 7, maybe you do call that bang 8 dig route and he ends up getting in the end zone. Like the entire complexion of how Georgia plays their safeties will be dictated by how much success they have in the pass game. And I'm looking at this matchup as a very, very key area of hopeful explosive plays for LSU, and obviously a big point where Georgia could just kind of shut the water off. Keep an eye on that matchup. Last one I'm looking at in terms of matchups between Georgia and LSU, going to look back on Georgia's side of things offensively. Kenny McIntosh has been a dog for them, no pun intended. These last 2 games, 114 yards is his average these last 2 games. He's been toting the rock, and he's kind of become that bell cow / lead back for them. And the reason why I think it's important how he plays is because LSU's defense, they got run on quite a bit last week. So the matchup is Kenny McIntosh versus Micah Baskerville / the LSU linebacking core. Let's break this down a little bit more. Obviously, Georgia getting to run the football, you win the trenches, you likely win the game. But think about what would have to happen if LSU isn't able to stop the run early. Well, then the safety's got to help. Then you have to play a little bit of a heavier box. And if you have to play a heavier box against Georgia, that's just not going to go well because they got Brock Bowers. And when you allocate more resources to stopping the run in Kenny McIntosh, then Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett have much more green grass to play with behind you, and things just don't work out very well on tape when you watch it back on Sunday. You say, dang, man, I wish we could have just had a 7-man box. I wish we could have had Baskerville, our leading tackler, just fill up and stop the run effectively and still be able to play a balanced, style of ball on defense. If they can stay balanced, that means that Baskerville is filling effectively, stopping McIntosh for enough of a gain to where they're comfortable living and dying that way and not having to commit extra and leaving themselves exposed to the big play. Because think about this world. Let's say Kenny McIntosh does force some bleeding they need to stop in that first half. Let's say at halftime he's got 70 yards, couple of touchdowns, and you're rethinking your whole approach defensively. That's great, okay? You got to, that's great for LSU to rethink it because you probably don't want to die that way. If you gave up 200-plus yards to A-Chain last week, great, rethink it. Bad news is when that happens, like I already mentioned, then the deep pass play opens up. And if Georgia can start hitting you with haymakers in the second half, think about explosive plays of the 40-yard variety to Brock Bowers. Maybe you get another deep shot to whoever it is. Insert big play wide receiver on the outside for Georgia. Like, when they start getting those big chunk plays, then they start to pull away. And you get down 10 points, 14 points to Georgia, it's like quicksand. It's hard to get out of. You're stuck at that point, and you kind of just have to die a slow death. Just an unfortunate reality. So being able to stop Kenny McIntosh with that linebacking core and playing a balanced defense could allow you to stay in this game. Very, very crucial. So the 3 battles I'm watching, to recap, Harold Perkins and Todd Monkin. Harold Perkins would be a game wrecker for you if you don't scheme it up properly. But if you do, Georgia could have a good day offensively. I don't think that's too much of a stretch in terms of how we're breaking it down. Javon Bullard, Kayshon Boutte. Kayshon Boutte, the most talented player for LSU. If he can have a big day, that will change, obviously, the entire way that LSU runs their offense, changes the entire way that Georgia has to run their offense as well, because if you're trying to chase LSU for points, well, then maybe LSU's in the driver's seat and how they can run tempo and things of that nature. So keep an eye on that. Javon Bullard, though, one of the best slot defenders in the country. I'm excited to watch those 2 guys go at it, 2 heavyweight fighters. Then finally, Kenny McIntosh, the LSU linebacking group, led by Micah Baskerville. It's going to be a big one. Because if Georgia can just pound the rock, LSU will, 1, have to adjust, and then 2, leave themselves exposed to the big play. Not a way that you want to live. So we already gave you a prediction in this game. Go check out that video to get our final thoughts. But as a whole, these matchups will determine the outcome of the SEC title game. Excited to watch it. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.